Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be doing a very quick camera comparison between the Motorola G8 Power and the Motorola G30. Now both of these phones sport quad camera setups, but they feature very different hardware. So how do they compare? Let's dive in. So first of all, I'll quickly go through the specs of each phone's camera system. For the G30 you have a 64 megapixel main sensor with an f1.7 aperture with quad pixel technology. This takes 16 megapixel photos by default, and this also shoots video up to 1080p at 60 frames per second. This is backed up by an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide with a 118 degree field of view. Then lastly, you have two 2 megapixel f2.4 macro and depth cameras. As for the G8 Power, you have a 16 megapixel f1.7 main camera with video capture up to 4K at 30 frames per second. This is also backed up by an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, also with a 118 degree field of view. But there's also an 8 megapixel f2.2 telephoto camera with 2x optical zoom, and lastly a 2 megapixel macro camera with an f2.2 aperture as well. So going by the specs, both of these phones have very different camera hardware, so it'll be very interesting to see how they compare in everyday use. So the first photo is this one in my garden taken on the G30. It's a nice quality photo with plenty of detail and accurate colours. So one thing to bear in mind with the Motorola G30, and it did take me a little while to get used to it, that when you're looking at the preview of your photo on the screen, it looks like the photo quality is going to be absolutely rubbish, but it isn't until you've pressed the shutter button and the phone has actually processed the image that they come out as they should. So despite being a pretty dull day, this phone did well, and by using pixel binning, this brings in more light, therefore retains a lot of detail, and even cropping in, there's still good detail, and the colours aren't too punchy either, which you do find on other phones with AI enhancements. Switching to the ultra-wide, unsurprisingly, there is a lot of detail, and the colours do go a bit lighter, but still a nice quality photo. I waited for the light to reduce a bit to have a go at night mode, and to my eyes I find that the night mode shot was actually worse than the auto shot. It was darker and lost some detail, so not sure what happened there. Looking on the settings of the photo, the phone didn't increase the shutter speed that much, it just ramped up the ISO. So if I now compare the same photos taken on the G8 Power, which uses a standard 16 megapixel sensor, so no pixel binning tech here, but in terms of the overall image quality, these are also very good. A little bit darker, but that's no doubt down to the lack of pixel binning, bringing in less light. But detail is very good, and even cropping in, there isn't much loss. And using the telephoto lens is a nice experience, offering 2x lossless zoom, but with lighter colours. And there's always that argument of, are you better just using the phone's 64 megapixel mode and cropping in instead of using the telephoto lens? And sadly there is no night mode on the G8 Power, so nighttime photography is going to be very tricky. And switching to the ultra wide on the G8 Power was an interesting one for me. I sound like a broken record, but loss of detail again, yes, but the photo was brighter and I noticed the colours were a bit more saturated, but not to the point of being unrealistic. Definitely a more pleasing photo between the two phones for me personally, but let me know what you think. Now one area that I found the G30 to be considerably better than the G8 Power is in portrait mode. Now the G8 Power does that really annoying thing where it switches to the telephoto camera for portrait mode, which of course has a much lower resolution and smaller aperture, so detail and depth of field are not as good as the G30, which you can see in these photos. The G30 is brighter with better bokeh and more detail, and the G8 Powers is just a bit of a dark mess to me, which is really unfortunate. Portrait selfies, however, are very similar, only differing in colour profile and exposure. They're both good, but not great. And so here's just a quick sample of video from each phone. I won't talk much about video as I know less about that than I do on photography, but if you're into shooting a lot of 4K video, then the G8 Power is the one to go for, as you only get 1080p on the G30, but don't expect amazing stabilisation on either, but then you can at this price point. So that's my quick camera comparison between the Motorola G8 Power and the Motorola G30. While the G8 Power offers a more versatile setup, it does fall down in not having pixel binning technology for brighter photos, and that switching to the telephoto lens for portrait mode to me is really annoying. But the main camera still does take pretty great photos. But which would you pick? Let me know in the comments, And also let me know in the comments if there's any other budget phones that you would like me to review or have a look at. And if you did like this video, don't forget to subscribe and turn your notification bell on so you know when I do a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.